I didn't realize just how good the Cursed Thrall origin trait was until I made my last video covering Oversoul Edict, and it made me realize that it would be even stronger when using Word of Crota, basically turning it into a Dollar Tree version of Sunshot. For anyone who hasn't messed around with the Crota's End raid weapons too much yet, the origin trait Cursed Thrall cause any final blows with the weapon after getting a melee kill to trigger a Cursed Thrall explosion. That melee kill is going to give you 7.5 seconds of this effect, and then you can also throw on the seasonal artifact mod Origin Perk Specialization 1, which jumps it up to 15 seconds. So the cycle is literally just getting a melee kill every 10 to 15 seconds so that you can constantly keep the origin trait active. Then any kill you get, body shot or headshot, will trigger a Cursed Thrall explosion. That's basically the reason I figured this would be best on a hand cannon. With Radiant melees on Hunter and then Frenzy, it was very easy to one-shot red bars or just two-shot them even under power, which allowed you to trigger the explosions constantly and very easily. The damage is also extremely good, killing nearby enemies even in some underpower areas, and then anything that's further away from the explosion usually ends up finishable. The data compendium does also say that the explosion is element matching. Usually Cursed Thrall explosions are arc, but in some of the gameplay it does look to be dealing higher amounts of damage to void shields. Obviously, the only downside is that Word of Crota is a 180 RPM hand cannon, but I do think that some of the rolls make up for this. 180s just tend to feel not the best in PvE. They lack as much damage and range as 140s, and in my opinion, they've always just had an awkward level of recoil with the RPM they're at. But even still, I think when used for clearing trash ads, this gun feels great. We're over in D2 Foundry right now. I'm going to go over a couple of different roles with different perk selections, depending on if you guys want to really lean into the Cursed Thrall explosions and optimize that, get a general use role, or also have one that's optimized for Void and synergizing with Void, because this is obviously a Void hand cannon. Going over the very first role, if you guys want to lean into the explosions with Cursed Thrall, you can pair this very easily with Dragonfly, which, as you're going to see, this deals 123.89 damage. Cursed Thrall is 123.5. They're basically the exact same amount of damage, so using both is going to basically double the Cursed Thrall damage. This just means that you have to have Cursed Thrall procced and get a headshot anytime you want both to go off. And as you're going to see, they're both in a 4.5 meter radius. You can also pair this very easily with Frenzy. As you're going to see with Frenzy active, we're jumping all the way up to max handling and max reload speed. So then after this, I would just do something like Accurized Rounds and then Hammerforged Rifling so that you get that increased range and then a range masterwork. You could also opt for stability. I know a lot of people think that range is kind of useless in PvE. We go up from like 28 meters to 32 meters when we put all this extra range on. So it does kind of help just a bit with the fall off damage. I think this is a pretty good role if you want to lean into a really solid role and then also have a lot of fun with those explosions. As far as a general use role goes, for any level of content, no matter what subclass you're playing or class you're playing, I would just run something like Frenzy. I think with the reload, the handling, and the constant 15% damage, this is way too good not to run on most weapons. And then I'd opt for something like Demolitionist because 10% grenade energy per kill helps a ton. And then obviously, whenever you're running something like Frenzy, because it covers most of your other stats, I would just run Hammerforged, Accurized, and then still go to that range masterwork. This would be my second overall role if I just wanted to have fun with this and not really lean into Dragonfly and trying to trigger those explosions. For this role, you could easily hot swap it for more casual content to something like Adrenaline Junkie rather than Rampage. Here you're getting 33% increased damage at max stacks. It's very easy to hit max stacks when you're using Demo and Adrenaline Junkie because you get max stacks when throwing your grenade, or for whatever reason you could run something like Rampage to be at the same damage value with only having 3 stacks required. The reason I say these are more casual roles is because I don't think it's as easy to consistently get these stacks up in higher end content, especially when playing under power, which is why I always default to something like Frenzy, which is super easy to use and is pretty much always there as long as you're in combat. And then lastly, for a Void Controlled Demolition Titan, you could run something like Destabilizing Rounds and Repulsor Brace. I do think Destabilizing Rounds is a bit of a troll perk to put on weapons, but on Controlled Demo, even with the cooldown, you can apply the Volatile to all the enemies nearby, and then Controlled Demo does the rest of the work because it keeps chaining that back and forth between the enemies, not requiring you to have this up at pretty much all times. And then you can obviously pair this with Cursed Thrall to trigger those explosions and get more AoE and damage. And then Repulsor Brace, because they're Void debuffed from Volatile, will constantly keep you at that 45 HP overshield. where you're getting 50% damage reduction. After this, because we're not running something like Frenzy and getting those bonus stats, I would recommend Flared Magwell, really for the reload speed, and then you could go Fluted Barrel for the handling and stability. And then after that, I would go with a reload speed Masterwork so that you're pretty much always getting a snappy reload off and not sitting there reloading your weapon all the time. This is definitely one of the most enjoyable weapons that I've used in a while now, but I don't want to mislead anyone and act like this is meta or the next best primary. Realistically, it's pretty troll. You could easily use it in any raid or dungeon, strikes, general areas in the game, because all those areas have enemies that die rather quickly. But as soon as you get into underpower content like master raids or dungeons, grandmasters, even day one raids, you really want to be using the best of the best archetypes. And even though a lot of people like to coat behind them, 180s are not a good archetype. They're solid for Lucky Pants, and that's about it. That said, I do think a roll with Frenzy really helps the weapon out. You're getting max handling, max reload speed, and 15% increased damage, which lasts indefinitely. Demolitionist is also a great perk for the grenade energy and any grenade-based build. As you've seen in a lot of other videos, my Unforgiven God roll with both Demo and Frenzy is literally one of my favorite weapons and rolls of all time, and it works great for Void and even Solar builds. And then the roll with Destabilizing Rounds and Repulsor Brace, I do honestly think is solid as well. I have a Hero's Burden with Destabilizing Rounds, and I do think it feels great for getting Volatile off whenever I am on Void Titan. Other than that, the perk isn't really ever needed on Hunter or Warlock. Let me know your thoughts on Word of Crota in the comments down below, and I do also stream a bunch over on my Twitch. We end up doing a bunch of low man, speedruns, and some boss bake challenges over there. A link to that is in the description below if you guys want to check that out. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.